President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
And we are going to resist these racist, sexist policies.
You know what? He speaks from the heart, and he's going to make America great again. I believe in that.
Preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda, as we examine America's next chapter with its new president. He tore up the political playbook, yet rose to the top. The United States' new commander-in-chief, Donald Trump, has been sworn in after a bitter and divisive run-up. Now he begins the job of running the country, one that he promised to make great again. What will that mean? How will Trump spend his time in office? One thing's for certain, he's set to be a president like no other. For the next hour, we'll bring you analysis and predictions about what we can expect from the next 4 years. We'll hear from supporters of Trump and one of his most outspoken critics, Khizr Khan, the father of a fallen Muslim soldier. We'll also take you to Washington, D.C.'s Pennsylvania Avenue. Tweet us your comments and questions throughout the show using the hashtag Newsmakers. You can also tweet at me, at Imran Garda. We begin, though, with Randolph Nogel as he reports on America's unprecedented presidency.
We need a truly great leader now. I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
Love him or hate him, Donald Trump was a presidential candidate like no other. His proposals.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
Donald Trump consistently smears the character of Muslims.
His rhetoric.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
Let me do it in 2 languages. Es un racista. He is a flat-out racist.
His self-assured style.
You're not prepared now to commit
What
to
I'm
that
saying
principle.
is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
And his lack of traditional presidential decorum.
We cannot afford to be so politically correct anymore.
And it turned out to be exactly what many of his supporters were waiting for. For some, a wild card is exactly what's needed to shake up a game where the House always wins. Like others here, Ski voted for Donald Trump because he wants something different.
The greedy got greedier and greedier. Now, guess what? Middle class are getting booted. That's just not right.
He organized bikers to unite from different parts of the country in support of Donald Trump.
I'm 53 years old. When I'm 65, I probably won't get nothing from the government, even though I'll work 40 years. But I'm showing, hey, these are just regular people, saw on social media, say, hey, I'm going to support this. I like what this idea is about. And it shows, just one person can, make a difference. And we're going to write down as one, motorcycles and cages as one long line so they can hear us roar.
Many people believe that Donald Trump won because he spoke to a large part of middle America that feels neglected by political elites here in Washington. The engines of those riding into town are a sort of rallying cry to say there's a new sheriff in town. But at 32%, Donald Trump enters the White House with the lowest approval rating of any U.S. president-elect in history.
It's unclear whether Donald Trump's promise to make America great again is for all Americans.
For one, you talk about cutting off food stamps. People need food stamps. You talk about cutting off SSI. People need SSI. Not everybody is able to get a damn job.
The changes that they're trying to usher in are the exact opposite of progressive values that we've been very fortunate to experience over the last 8 years.
He's just somebody who's very, very unsafe, and I'm really disappointed that so many people voted for him.
Nearly 70 Democratic lawmakers aren't attending the inauguration, and some citizens have planned counter events and protests. But his most ardent supporters are hopeful that in the next 4 years, Donald Trump will remake America in their vision.
Finally, we have a man that stands up that is going to actually get something done.
Randolph Nokel, The Newsmakers in Washington.
Okay, to discuss what a Trump presidency means for America and the world, I'm joined here in the studio by former U.S. diplomat Matthew Bryza. He served under Barack Obama as the U.S. ambassador to Azerbaijan and is now a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council think tank. And Austin Rasmussen, he's the acting vice chairman for the Norway chapter of Republicans Abroad. And in Washington, D.C., we have Khizr Khan. He's the father of Army Captain Humayun Khan, who was killed in Iraq. His criticism of Trump at the Democratic National Convention went viral. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure having all of you on the program. Let me start with you, Ambassador Bryza. Firstly, did you ever think we'd get to this stage, this moment where Donald Trump is sworn in as President of the United States? And what did you make of his speech? Because it didn't sound like a unifying speech. It sounded like a rallying cry to me.
Yeah, I didn't expect Donald Trump ever to make it this far. I mean, he committed every sort of political mistake one could in terms of rhetoric during the campaign, from denigrating Mr. Khan's son to attacking Senator John McCain for being a failed soldier because he was taken prisoner, to calling for a ban on all Muslims from entering the United States. These are statements that would have killed any other politician's political career. And I think his inaugural address was, unfortunately, very much in that same spirit. It was the most radical inaugural I've ever heard or read. It was divisive, and it was all about, I don't know, not making America great again, because what has made the United States great since the Second World War is a vision that we're better when the rest of the world is better, and especially when our allies are better. So, yeah, I never thought we'd get to this point, and I hope that as his administration goes on, the tone will change and become more presidential.
Austin Rasmussen, do you agree with that? The tone of that speech, and he said America first, America first. I'm not sure he knows of the reference, 1930s, 1940s, which was used by many Nazi sympathizers. What did you think?
Well, I was a bit surprised by his inaugural address. I was expecting him to kind of temper his rhetoric a bit as far as being divisive, but I also am not surprised either to the extent that this is him remaining consistent with his rhetoric so far. But he is the symptom of a country that's already been divided over the last 8 years. He's not the cause of that. The country has been polarized for some time now, and the Republican Party and specifically in particular has been divided for some time now, which is why Trump is now the president.
As a Republican who initially didn't support him, you were supporting Rand Paul.
That's correct.
Right? But then you threw your backing behind Trump because you backed the Republican candidate. When you heard that speech, did you feel inspired by your new president?
I wouldn't say inspired was the word, or the word that I would choose. When I threw my backing behind Trump, I did so with skepticism and with reservations. My primary hope for this election was to see the end of the Clinton cartel, which we did. When I watched the inauguration and watched all of the ceremonial events today, I felt light in my heart, not because Trump was there being sworn in as president, but because I got to see Hillary Clinton and see the loss on her face.
I'm sure many Americans feel that way. Mr. Khan, in D.C., when you heard Donald Trump promise in that speech today to protect the Constitution, you held up that Constitution as a lesson to him. It was extraordinary. You were emotional. You were powerful at the DNC. When he promised to protect the Constitution, did you believe him?
Well, we are disappointed. It's the same old rhetoric, saying something for political expediency, but not meaning a word of it. This is same old Trump, and we are saddened. I remain standing in a spirit, in sympathy, in solidarity with all those patriot Americans that are protesting him coming to office with that type of rhetoric in the background. He owes to the democracy of this country. He owes to the decency of American nation, to the goodness of America, to take the steps towards solidarity, towards unity, towards reconciliation, but we saw none. We don't expect from him, because this person had proven over the period of 2 years how divisive he is, how selfish he is, how much un-American values he has practiced and he continues to practice. So we don't expect anything better from him.
And my apologies, you are in Virginia, not in D.C. Some of the stuff that he had said, he walked back, and he might not have apologized, but he said, well, I didn't really mean that. For example, the Muslim ban, and I'd spoken to one of his advisors who said that's off the table now, and it will just be radical vetting and so on. Has any of that, since the DNC and the aftermath, and of course he insulted your wife as well, since that time, is there anything that he has said or done up until now that makes you think, hey, let me give this man a chance?
Well, you give a chance to the person who is deliberate, who is committed to his word. This person says one thing one day, next day he changes it, says something else. This is nothing but political expediency, and he means nothing. What I am heartened to hear is the advisors that he has chosen, those advisors, patriot Americans that are going to curtail his divisive rhetoric and his divisive thinking. I am hopeful, because of those patriots managing the Department of Defense, managing the Homeland Security, I am encouraged because of them and their patriotism. They have proven their life's work has proven that they are true patriots. They know the values of this country, which is freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. And I, one more time, through your program again, and I have done it ever since, I do it again, I ask him to get familiar with the values of democracy, values of United States, values of equal protection, values of equal dignity, if he wishes to govern with some success. I don't expect any better from him, but at least we can raise our voice. We continue to stand in solidarity, protesting his policies, his rhetoric, up until he changes and comes in line with American values.
Matthew Breiser, Khizr Khan is somewhat encouraged by some of his picks. When you look at the cabinet that he is currently putting together, are you encouraged?
I am. I am very much encouraged by his selection of General Mattis as Secretary of Defense. General Mattis has a brilliant strategic mind and also operational tactical mind. He understands how the world works in the big picture, and he understands how to get things done. I am very reassured by General Mattis's views on how the U.S. needs to deal with Russia, which seems to be quite different from that of President Trump. So we're going to have a very interesting playing out of the President's views versus the Secretary of Defense's. I think Rex Tillerson is a selection for Secretary of State, if he gets confirmed. Could be a very successful Secretary of State, in as much as he knows how to negotiate tough deals, including with Vladimir Putin. A lot has been made of Rex Tillerson for having supposedly developed a friendship with Vladimir Putin. But you also have to keep in mind he negotiated deals that are great for his former company, ExxonMobil. And you don't get that if you're naive about the Russian leader.
Many people, Matthew, say that under President Obama, he might have had good intentions, but the United States maybe lost credibility, lost standing. It was less feared and less respected around the world. As a former ambassador, on day one, do you think the United States is going to be more feared and more respected under President Trump?
Yeah, fear and respect have interesting interrelated roles in foreign policy. I think for sure America is going to be more feared. But it's going to be feared not only by America's enemies, but also by its friends, also by its allies. What Donald Trump is pursuing is essentially the breakup of the post-World War II international liberal order, small l, in terms of democratic values, unity of the transatlantic family. He appears the breakup of the EU, encouraging Brexit. and he has called NATO obsolete. Those sorts of policies send chills through the body politic of our European allies. And so there will be fear, and I'm not sure that translates into respect.
Austin, when Randolph's report was running, when he mentioned, as the bikers were sort of swarming, and when he mentioned the polls and that Donald Trump is the least popular president in modern times, essentially in opinion polls, there might be some buyer's remorse from some people. You had a bit of a sigh in the seat.
Oh, no, I didn't have a sigh. I had a laugh.
Tell me why.
Well, I've been hearing that phrase all day, and every time I hear it, I laugh.
But it's a stat, not a phrase.
It's
right?
a stat, but
it's a CNN ORC stat that says less than 40%. Right?
And when you say CNN, I laugh even harder. How much stock am I supposed to put in the polls? We saw what happened on Election Day, and we saw the credibility that was absolutely dismantled and destroyed by the mainstream media. And these are the same people that are saying Trump is the least popular president.
Okay, let me ask it the other way around. If I told you that Donald Trump on day one is more than 44 points less valued and supported by Americans on day one than Barack Obama was on day one in 2009, what does that mean to you?
Well, it's not surprising. Again, I circle back to the point that I made when we began the program, that the United States is very polarized right now. I also think that one important point to make here is you see the protest on the other side saying Trump shouldn't be president. He's an illegitimate president because Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. We're a democracy. We're supposed to be fighting for democratic values. And when I hear this type of rhetoric, I feel compelled to remind people that the United States isn't a democracy. We are a republic. Our system is designed in this way to prevent New York City and LA from deciding who the leader of the entire country is.
But that's a little bit wonkish when you say the United States isn't a democracy, because there's an implication I don't like democracy. I know what you mean, I know what you're trying to say, but it's a bit flippant, isn't it?
Well, it depends on who you're speaking to, I guess. When you go to the left and liberal with a capital L, and you speak to the left in America, this is the kind of idea that they're fighting for. And we saw that not only in this election, but we saw that with Bush as well, when Gore demanded a recount again and again. Hillary Clinton herself didn't acknowledge Bush was president for months after the decision was final. And we're seeing it again now. I think it is important to distinguish between a republic and a democracy. It's important to distinguish between European-style politics and parliament and to that of the United States Congress and president and the executive branch and the legislative branch.
Okay, let's get a feel of the pulse on the ground in D.C. Let's cross to Randolph Nogel, who's in Washington, D.C. Randolph, I saw some pictures of violence coming through not too long ago. Tell me, what's the mood like in D.C. right now?
Well, it really depends who you ask. We've spoken to a number of Trump supporters while we've been here, and a lot of them are telling us that they're ecstatic that this man is taking power. He's a political outsider, obviously, and somebody that they believe will actually change America. But then on the other hand, what you've seen is tension really running high here on the Capitol. We've seen a number of protests, tear gas in just the last few minutes, as well as pepper spray. A lot of these protesters that we've spoken to have said that they're afraid about how Donald Trump will deliver on the promises. They think he's exactly the wrong man for the job. But with all major political events, you will always see protests. The fervency of this particular one is a lot higher. Now, in his speech, Donald Trump really touched on this theme of anti-establishment politics. This is the platform that he ran on. And what we've really seen from both the left and the right is that this message has resonated. But what people will say on the left that we've spoken to here in Washington is that he's exactly the wrong man for the job. He's a billionaire. He has a number of financial stakes vested in Wall Street, the very place that he's promising to clean up, and the connection between Washington and Wall Street.
And Randy, you've traveled across the U.S. You've spent a lot of time in multiple cities, multiple states over the past few weeks. You've been doing some fantastic work. Let me ask you directly, how divided is the country right now?
Well, traveling across the country, you meet people from the left and from the right, urban and rural. I think what the unifying theme of this election is the idea that people here are disconnected from what's happening on the ground. You saw that on the left with the Bernie Sanders movement. After the Democratic Party lost, he came out and basically said that he's ashamed of how the Democratic Party has lost touch with their base. On the right, you have a number of people that want really just to be left alone and for big government to get off their back. So really, a presidential election and indeed an inauguration is a reflection of where the country is at the time. 8 years ago, when President Barack Obama came to power with a decisive victory, there was a lot of hope, even among his supporters that we've spoken to. There's an enthusiasm gap 8 years later. A lot of people are struggling across this country, and that some people feel like he hasn't delivered on his promises. Donald Trump has obviously capitalized on that, and in the election we saw a fairly conventional candidate in Hillary Clinton not be able to distance herself from the establishment, despite the fact that Barack Obama is extremely popular going out and Donald Trump isn't as popular. You see a very polarized country where his supporters really support him adamantly, and his detractors really oppose him with the same intensity.
Randolph Nogel joining us there from Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for that, Randy. Let's take a look now at the conversations taking place online around the inauguration. Inauguration Day has been the top global trend, followed by a thank you to the Obamas for their time as the first family. But the Twitterverse has also been a place for anti-Trump supporters to raise their concerns by using the hashtag #DisruptJ20. Now, one group of protesters in Washington, D.C. was tear-gassed by police just hours ahead of Trump's swearing-in ceremony. These are some of the pictures coming through on Twitter. There were also protests across New York City. But as this Twitter user pointed out, protests didn't stop Trump supporters from turning out to watch his swearing-in ceremony. That's from Paul Joseph Watson. Now, Melania Trump, or Melania, also became a popular hashtag in her own right by taking over the mantle of First Lady, with social media users keen to point out that she was channeling another First Lady, Jackie Kennedy, with her outfit choice. But now that Obama's watch has ended, social media users are wondering what will be President Trump's approach to some very critical issues. The top worldwide searches on Google for Donald Trump are about his views on issues like immigration, Russia, DACA, marijuana, and hacking. Now, his singing ability hasn't become a top trend yet. You're gonna want to watch this one. But this video of one of his Secret Service minders has already gone viral. It's a fantastic zoom in. Twitter's amazing. And now that Donald Trump is the U.S.'s 45th president, he's given the reins to the POTUS Twitter account. There you go. He hasn't tweeted yet, it's said, but I doubt that's going to stay the same. Tell us what you think about America's new president. Tweet us your comments and questions using the hashtag Newsmakers. You can tweet at me, at Imran Garda as well. Let me put this to the panel because, sometimes it sounds trivial that we're talking about Twitter when we're talking about the swearing in of America's 45th president. But Matthew Breiser, should they be taking his phone away from him now that he's got the big job?
Well, he's got to call the shots. He's the leader, and he needs to appreciate, I think he will quickly appreciate, I should say, what anyone who works in the White House, as I did for 4 years, does, which is there's no job, anything like that, as President of the United States. The cliche is, many of them drinking out of a fire hose and overwhelmed by information. And the only way to make a decision at that level is to weigh all the aspects of it and think and reflect, because as President Obama has said, any decision that gets to the president's desk is one that nobody else could resolve. So shooting from the hip and making policy via Twitter, it simply cannot succeed. So I hope he makes his own decision to take away his phone.
Austin, I was gonna bring up David Duke, the former KKK leader, and the fact that he said, "We did it." Donald J. Trump, I've changed my mind. I've reconsidered. It's low-hanging fruit. I'm gonna let that slide. But I'm gonna mention David Frum. And let me pose this to Khizr Khan first, and then I'll come to you, Austin. So you have George Bush's former speechwriter, Sir David Frum, a Republican, tweeting, "The worst human being ever to enter the presidency, and I include all the slaveholders." Mr. Khan, What do you make of that tweet from David Frum?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, Ahmad. My concern remains with his policies and his rhetoric and where he's going to take the country. I hope he does not continue to embarrass us by his tweeting habits and the way he maligns those who have dissent, those who are against his rhetoric and against his policies. And I want to remind us that this is American tradition, American democracy, be it democracy or Republican system of government. Dissent is the essence of democratic and Republican history of this country. And I encourage dissent to remain encouraged, continue to do their part. They are as patriotic as those who have supported him and continue to support Donald Trump. But I hope that the embarrassment that this nation has felt by his tweeting habits, hopefully his advisors now will insist upon him to tone down this maligning those who disagree with him and tweet in a manner that is literally embarrassing to any decent grown-up person.
Mm-hmm. Let me expand on this, Austin. Take David Frum's tweet as representative of those on the right who just cannot stand Trump. We've heard equal, if not worse, from people like Mitt Romney, and then they've come on board, right, eventually. What's going to happen to the Republican Party? Are we going to see more and more people who might have insulted Trump or said, this guy will never be my president, coming into the circle, or are we going to see the party split into two very distinguishable camps?
Well, I think we're already seeing the former. We're seeing that people who weren't very fond of Trump at the beginning, take Paul Ryan, for example, who are not exactly coming into the circle, but realizing that a unified party is far more important than petty differences. And the establishment of the party, Paul Ryan now included, unfortunately, does have to come to some sort of reckoning and realizing why Trump was elected in the first place, why it was the same constituency that put this Congress in office as the constituency that elected Trump. And that's because they're sick and tired of what they perceive to be inaction within a Republican Congress. Since 2010, when the Republicans took the House and have increased their power in the legislative branch since then, when they've held that power, the Republican constituency has felt that the Republican Congress has done too little and has not taken on President Obama to the extent that they should have with the power that they were possessing at the time. So I do think that we'll see a more unified party. It's imperative that we see a more unified party. We're seeing a similar situation now in 2016 that for Republicans as we saw in 2008 with the Democrats.
Right.
Just on the other side. And if we want to do well in the midterm elections and then do well again in 2020, both sides, Trump included, as well as the establishment, are going to have to work together.
Let me ask you, Matthew Bryza, what about the Democrats? Because you still have many who refuse to recognize Trump as president. He's sworn in now. He's the president, right? Jill Stein even made a good few million out of people, crowdfunding her for a recount, right?
Scam.
How has that hurt? How much has that hurt the Democrats, given that so many of them, we expected this, if Hillary Clinton was going to win, we expected many Trump supporters on the right to go, no, we don't recognize this election as valid. A lot of Democrats did that. Has it hurt the party?
Well, it remains to be seen. I mean, the Democratic Party is in a shambles right now, right? I mean, it collapsed into disputatiousness between the far left and the center, and could Hillary Clinton be left enough to attract some of Bernie Sanders supporters who instead were maybe going to go for Trump because Trump's such an anti-establishment candidate as well? So I think it really hurt the Democratic Party. I mean, obviously we'll know more in the next round of elections, but I think that approach by Democrats is hurting the United States because it is calling into question the validity of our democratic political system or our Republican political system. And that weakens the United States in the same way that Donald Trump earlier was also calling into question the sanctity and the credibility and integrity of our electoral system.
Mr. Khan, what can Donald Trump learn from President number 44, Barack Obama?
Well, everything. The very first thing he can learn is the decency, the values of America which is inclusive of all Americans instead of divisiveness. He can learn from Barack Obama some family values. He can learn from him how to treat the people that disagreed with Barack Obama with equal dignity, with equal respect. These are some very basic values, and I am embarrassed to say this, that I am to remind him just these some very basic, fundamental human decency values that Trump needs to learn to conduct himself.
And Austin, there'd be many Republicans who'd agree with that, right?
Well, I don't know if they go to the extent that he can learn everything from Obama, but certainly maybe he could take a step in the direction of holding back sometimes, holding back when he's definitely impulsive when he speaks, and I'm sure that there are a lot of Republicans who would agree that he could have impulse control.
I mean, at the heart of it is people asking that question, is he fit for office? Does he have the decency, the decorum, the class to be president? I think that's at the heart of it, isn't it?
Again, I have to reference history here. The United States, and the way that it was designed, it was never meant for there to be career politicians. When the United States was first conceived, the idea was that people would come into public service outside of their real jobs and be there for a period of time to serve the public and then go back to their real jobs. And if you see how we've transformed over the last 200 years, where now we expect there to be a career establishment politician to be in office because that, for some reason, is the only type of person qualified to lead the country. I wholeheartedly disagree. I'm not going to say that Trump is unqualified for the office because he didn't bomb 7 countries like his predecessor and his and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
Okay, you slipped a little bob in there. Okay, still to come, poking fun at the president. Political comedian Jeremy McClellan gives his take on Trump's new role. And political forecaster George Friedman predicts how Trump's presidency will shape America and the world. Welcome back to our special edition of the Newsmakers as we cover the start of Donald Trump's presidency. Now, just a reminder, you can follow us online. We're live streaming on Periscope and on Facebook Live. What you have to do is you have to use the hashtag Newsmakers. You can watch us. We've got about 25 minutes left on the program here. You can watch it again on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Periscope. Do join us and share your comments. Comment and let us know what you think, if you disagree with some of our guests as well. Now, the billionaire businessman with no political experience has been sworn in. What a day. What a time to be alive. And he comes to power deeply unpopular. Yet, there's one sector of society that may be particularly pleased. Comedians, who consider him as manna from heaven for all the potential material he'll provide them for their routines. Now, one of those is political comedian Jeremy McClellan, who joins us now from Charleston, South Carolina. Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us. I guess, congratulations on this mega stimulus to the comedy industry.
I don't know if it is going to be so great. I mean, everyone says that comedy is going to get better because of Donald Trump, but one of the roles of comedy, one of the roles of comedians is to sort of, as the little boy in The Emperor Has No Clothes, to tell the emperor, to tell everybody that the emperor has no clothes. So what do you do with someone who literally just says, I'm naked and I don't care? I mean, there is a limit to how much comedy and how much comedians can actually influence the election.
I know during
so I'm not sure it is such a great thing.
Yeah, I know during the campaign you had a bit of Trump material. I was mining YouTube for some of your routines.
Sure.
You're really, really funny. And that's why we have you on the program, of course, because we tried to find the funniest. Let me play a little clip for our viewers of something you said about Trump a few months ago.
Whenever there's an election, I always hear that phrase a lot, like a lot of people right now are saying that Donald Trump might be the next Hitler, right? A lot of people are saying that. And by people, I mean his supporters. They're like, oh my God. This guy might be the next Hitler. Like, oh my God, I don't want to jinx it, I don't want to jinx it, but like this guy, he might be the next Hitler. I feel like if I say it out loud, it won't happen, so I won't even want to say it, but like, he might be the next Hitler.
Jeremy, you're quite brilliant. Now, of course, some people might watch that and think, okay, I'm watching something that's not too different from The Daily Show, from Comedy Central, from Saturday Night Live, where it's just left, liberal, elitist comedians just bashing the Republican, bashing the conservative.
absolutely.
They don't say anything about Obama. Obama's their king, and that's one of the things that Trump supporters do. They point out
absolutely.
these comedians. They go, oh, these guys, they just bash us. They bash us for being religious. They bash us for being conservative. Isn't that a problem in comedy?
Absolutely. It is. It's a huge problem in comedy. I think that, and it's sort of rich seeing so many comedians now positioning themselves as sort of voices of the resistance when they've spent the last 8 years playing court jester to American empire. I think that, and going really, really soft on Obama. And I mean, for me, I mean, I've been criticizing Obama for most of his reign, or most of his, I don't want to say reign, that sounds a little ominous, but for most of his presidency. And so I think it is sort of rich to see comedians now sort of talking about how important it is to speak truth to power, and now they're the outsiders, and really most of what they do is make fun of Trump's hair and make fun of a bunch of stuff that Trump actually doesn't really care about. I don't think Trump really cares that he's getting made fun of.
Okay, I want to call up something that you wrote on Facebook just a few hours ago. And I know this was set to friends only, and then we asked you if we could use this, so thanks so much. You said, and I quote, the sad thing about the next 4 years is that Trump is going to diminish America's respect for the office of the presidency down to where I've always thought it should be, making my opinions less unique.
Right.
Tell me what you meant by that.
Right, yeah. I mean, now everyone is going to be, you know, critical of the presidency and critical of power. Now people are very, very skeptical of the amount of power the president should have. And I think that's great. I think that's awesome. I think it's a welcome thing. However, I know that all of the power that Trump has is power that Obama accumulated for himself because he thought that, well, I'll just have this forever. Democrats will be in power forever. No one bad would ever get this power. No one bad would ever be in charge of all these flying death robots, right? And so, if you don't like the fact that Trump now has control over nuclear weapons, over all these sorts of very scary ways, if you don't like the fact that Trump can now, make a huge impact on American economic policy, if you don't like that Trump is in charge of all these things, maybe you shouldn't have been such a pushover when Obama was in charge of all these things. If you're worried that Trump is going to, tap your phone lines, crack down on freedom of the press, where were you when Obama was doing this? So, I mean, I think it's important that we sort of move on and concentrate on Trump. He is the president, and I don't want to just be saying, see, I told you so for so long, because Trump could very well be a lot worse than Obama, and I think he might be. But it is sort of rich to see so many people who spent so long ignoring every single, war that Obama was engaged in, every single, every single encroachment on American civil liberties, and cheerleading those things. And now they're like, oh no, Trump has it. And we're like, yeah, we were telling you this for a very long time. We were telling you that these powers are not things that the president should have. They should be, you should not be able to go to war without congressional approval. Well, we did. And everyone was like, yeah, but it's Obama. Like, it's okay. He's a nice guy. He's cool. He's a cool guy. So let's let him do this. And now Trump has it, and this could be awful.
Yeah, that's very profound. Final question for you. Maybe I'll make it a bit more local. Nikki Haley, one of Trump's picks for UN ambassador.
Right.
Right. Governor of South Carolina. So you know her better than I do.
Right.
Now, my immediate response to this, and this could be me because I watched too much of The Daily Show, I was like, it reminded me a little bit of like when I lived in Virginia, and my daughter was the only brown kid in class, and they said, well, we need somebody for Pocahontas, right? So, Nikki Haley, is she up to the job?
Right?
Is she up to the job? Am I being unfair? Is she up to the job?
I mean, she might be. I don't think that's necessarily why he picked her as like the best person. I think he was, and she was a critic of Trump throughout most of his candidacy. And so getting her out of the governorship, putting her at the UN, and letting her, the lieutenant governor, McMaster, letting him become the governor. He's a huge Trump supporter. I think that may have been a part of it. But no, I don't think that Nikki, I mean, the only thing qualifying her to be, besides being brown, like you said, is the fact that, like, maybe she would be able to take down the Confederate flag around the UN building, since that was her major accomplishment in South Carolina. I don't know. We don't know.
Okay, Jeremy, it's been good to get your fresh perspective. You have a really fascinating mind. Looking forward to following more of your work. Jeremy McClellan joining us there from Charleston. Let's go now to George Friedman in Austin, Texas. He's the founder and chairman of Geopolitical Futures, a publication dedicated to forecasting the course of global events. So it's a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you very much for joining us. A lot of people will be trying to treat you as some sort of wizard here and asking you to forecast the future. That's what we're going to be doing here as well. What can the world expect from a Trump presidency?
Well, with the Trump presidency or any other presidency, the United States is going to be less engaged in the world. We've been fighting a war in the Middle East for the past 15 years. It has not been successful. There's necessarily a re-examination of our relationship with the world, with NATO, on the question of free trade, certainly on the question of the Middle East. So I think you will see an attempt to lighten our presence while at the same time trying to contain ISIS. That's, of course, a contradiction, and many of the things that Trump says is a contradiction. But this desire to pull back from the world goes well beyond Trump to a deep feeling in the American public.
Would that have happened under Hillary Clinton as well?
Well, she came from the old school that still wanted to continue what I call the World War II model of fixed relationships like NATO, fixed treaties like the Pacific Trade Treaty. But she would have come under intense pressure. You have to understand that in the United States, we have reached a point after 15 years in the Middle East that we simply see little reason to continue. Some presence there is acceptable, but to the American public, it's not clear that the world wants us involved. It's not clear that we benefit from involvement. I think she would have enforced in the same direction.
I've got your Geopolitical Weekly in my inbox. I just got it. Referring to Trump's statements that NATO has become obsolete, you said, quote, "The president-elect has pointed out a reality many choose to ignore." I wonder, what is the alternative? Is the United States going to be willing to sort of hand over Eastern Europe, the Baltics, Central Europe to Vladimir Putin? Do you think General Mattis and the Trump advisors will be willing to have that reality play out?
Well, first, let's not fantasize about the power of Russia. It is an oil exporting country. The price of oil has fallen. Its economy is in shambles. Although it performed reasonably well in Syria, it certainly has not solved the Syrian problem. It has a very small footprint. Russia is a very weak country pretending to be much stronger than it is. And this the Turks have realized because the Russians have been courting the Turks very heavily. But on the other side of the equation, this is not 1955. Europe is not a poor, battered continent without any money. Europe is the equal of the United States in terms of GDP. The question is not whether we turn Eastern Europe over to Putin, but what is the European commitment to its own security?
Mm-hmm. You've argued that the system domestically can constrain any president, no matter who it is, with the checks and balances within the United States. But given that Donald Trump is just such an unpredictable man, does that still hold true?
It doesn't give him control of the Senate. So each senator gets elected by his own public. He owes nothing to the president. The president can do nothing for him. Right now, Trump's ratings are very low. The Republicans themselves are looking at this and saying, if I support Trump, will I lose my seat? So it has to be remembered that the American president, in terms of domestic policy, is one of the weakest leaders in the Euro-American world. He's not powerful. So whatever his personality is, whatever his demands are, he is facing a Congress that he doesn't influence or control, a Supreme Court that will rule the way it wants. He can say what he wants, but he can't do what he wants. And this is the problem he faces right now. He must increase his popularity, or the Republicans themselves will pull away from him.
So just trying to clarify that then. So on foreign policy then, okay, Clinton would have been different to Trump because she's more of a globalist, for example. But domestically, you're saying for the next 4 or maybe even 8 years, a Hillary Clinton presidency wouldn't have been too different to a Donald Trump presidency, domestically.
No, I think it may have been different domestically. But both of them had a Congress to vote for. And one of the things that people outside the United States don't understand is that in domestic policy, Congress is more important than the president. But if the president wants to build a wall in Mexico, Congress has to appropriate the money. So as we saw with health care under Obama, it took him years to get it. It didn't look anything like he wanted it to. Congress was the one making the decisions. So in domestic policy, you really have to look at Congress and what they want. And they're very wary of Trump. They're wary because what they want is to be reelected, and they're worried that if they're too close to Trump, they'll lose.
Is Donald Trump going to get 1 or 2 terms?
I would bet 1, simply because no president has started with such low popularity, and he only won because he ran against somebody much more unpopular. But that's a guess. It doesn't matter. But what matters is not whether Trump is in office or not. What matters is the redefinition of the American relationship with the world will continue under any president. This is now irreversible. And if he's going to preside over it, that's fine. If he's not, it'll still happen.
George Friedman, has been extraordinary talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's bring back our panel now. We have former U.S. Ambassador Matthew Breiser, who's a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council, Austin Rasmussen, the acting chairman of Republicans Abroad in Norway, and in Virginia, we have Khizr Khan, known for criticizing Trump at the DNC. Ambassador Breiser, you heard George Friedman there. Let me match that with Trump's speech, America First. We've enriched the world except ourselves. There's been American carnage. We're going to change all of that. Friedman says there's a redefinition of America's relationship to the world taking place. Does that mean isolationist America?
Well, it remains to be seen. I mean, there certainly is a trend in that direction of pulling back. If you look at the presidency of Barack Obama and now what Donald Trump says his plans are. I mean, I was appointed by President Obama, but I became a very sharp critic of his retrenchment and his. He was elected to be president in the United States and of the United States, and he really didn't show a great deal of interest in foreign policy early on. But let's go back even further. If you go back and listen to one of the first speeches that Colin Powell ever gave as Secretary of State, he said the United States has to get out of the business of nation building. So that was the initial take. But then we had 9/11. So I think while there's been this trend in Obama and now Trump's rhetoric to want to pull back, I think it's inevitable that the U.S. will get pulled back in. It just takes the next major crisis, and the American people will demand that the president does something, whatever that may be.
Khizr Khan, is it possible to have an America that recoils a little bit, digs a psychological trench or builds a psychological wall around it, while it still maintains the rights and dignity of Muslim Americans, Latino Americans, and other minorities? Is that possible?
Well, I hope I'm not disappointing your audience, but that is not the character of America. American nation always had been beacon of hope for the rest of the world. That involves moral leadership and the leadership of the world by its means and by its policies. And United States remain beacon of hope. The nation of United States, the country of United States remain beacon of hope. With that, role in the mankind today comes a responsibility of engagement, responsibility of reasonable, prudent engagement, reasonable and prudent involvement in the world affairs, moving forward, maintaining our interests, yet performing the role of the leader in the world. And I'm hopeful that United States will continue to do that.
Oh, okay, so Austin, you have the father of a fallen soldier, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, killed in Iraq in 2004, saying we still have to be the leader of the world. What do you think?
Well, there's only so much resources that we can pour into the rest of the world if the rest of the world, in particular our allies, aren't willing to put in their own resources. I think Trump's problem with NATO, for example, isn't the problem with the idea of NATO or having a strong ally in each NATO country. The problem is that the majority of NATO countries throughout Europe continuously refuse to put in the at least 2% that's expected of them into the defense spending. And Trump, I think, looks at this as a businessman and reviews how much the United States is pouring of its resources and time and energy and blood into defending the free world and seeing how comparatively lazy the rest of NATO has been.
Matthew Bryza, final question for you. Sure. If Trump had to call you in now, say, hey, I followed your work, I like you, you've done some good work in Eastern Europe and beyond, I've got a set of priorities over the next few weeks and months. What do you think I need to do? What should I do right now, Ambassador Bryza?
What you should do right now, Mr. President, is reassure the U.S. allies that we are one, that transatlantic unity remains a priority, and that the United States will continue to play the role in the world that Mr. Khan was talking about, but also that our NATO allies expect of us. I mean, I agree with Austin. Or Mr. President, I agree with Mr. Austin that our allies need to share more of the burden and reach their agreed 2% spending goal. But the U.S. will be there with you, and we have to open our eyes to what Vladimir Putin's plans are to peel Turkey away from the NATO alliance and to undermine that liberal order that the U.S. has led for 50-plus years.
Okay, gentlemen, unfortunately, we are out of time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Khizr Khan, Austin Rasmussen, and Matthew Bryza, thank you so much for joining us on this historic day. Hope to have you on the show again.
Thank you.
So much has been said, so little left to be said until we can judge him on his actions and not his words. For Donald Trump, he has reached the promised land. He's a man who has it all: the money, the lifestyle, the empire. Now he's the leader of the so-called free world. The question remains, is the work in the hot seat going to be as exciting for him, as valuable to him as the chase? He took the political process and he turned it all upside down. Will he thrive or will he wilt? Now his relationship to other countries, to his people, and to us, the media, will all be in the spotlight. Trump has been the most heavily scrutinized president-elect so far, and might be the most heavily scrutinized president to come. But will we, as journalists, resist the temptation to only cover him negatively and, when it warrants it, to give credit where it's due to a democratically elected president? Well, I can't wait to find out. Thanks so much for joining us.